Hey, everybody. It is Monday morning, and I am going to have kind of a casual chat here with my good friend, Les Luthor, about a few things we've been wanting to chatter about. And so that's just what we're going to do. It's casual. It's not like a regular show, but we're going to explain some things and then chatter about some things. Hi, Les. Nice to talk to you.
Hi, Emily. Nice to talk to you. Always good to catch up.
Absolutely. So we've been trying to talk about doing this for a couple of weeks, and I think it's good that it didn't happen till now because I think a good example has arisen to explain the idea of chicken feed and double cross or double X as well. I had originally reached out to you because I sort of saw in my reality what I need to see to know that like a certain operation is kind of in full swing or rising. So that was why I originally reached out to you. But before we talk about this, because I do get some questions from people about what is the double X or the double cross. And so I want you to tell people what you mean when you say that.
Okay, so around the 1970s, a guy called J.C. Masterman came out with a book claiming to be a chairman of an organization called the Double Cross. The actual name was the 20 Committee, but it was a pun on what they do, okay? Because they double cross everyone. They're kind of above MI5 and slightly below the City of London in their whole kind of ranking, but it's double cross because 20 in Roman numerology, Roman numerals is XX, right? So yeah, I only kind of discovered them about a year ago, but for me, it was the most mind-blowing thing when I heard about it, right? Because essentially, during World War II, the British had control of the whole German intelligence services through these double-cross agents. They were German spies operating in the UK, but Britain had control of all of them. They were either directly double agents, i.e., they'd either gone to the British intelligence services and freely kind of offered their services, or the British intelligence services knew about them and just carried on letting them operate in the UK. They were just monitoring what they were doing, and because they were mostly playing the game of eating the chicken feed, which is somewhat true but useless information, the British were feeding them. They didn't interfere; they just allowed them to carry on doing what they were doing, because it is all part of the whole bigger game of fooling everyone into the grand deception of World War II. J.C. Masterman was quite that name itself, J.C. Masterman, right? It's like, Julius Caesar, the master of men. I mean, that name in itself, I think it's John Cecil Masterman, which sounds very similar to Cecil John Rhodes, right? And if you look at pictures of J.C. Masterman, I'm pretty sure, and I'm going to go very out here, I'm pretty sure he's Adolf Hitler. I'm pretty sure Adolf Hitler and J.C. Masterman are the same person, as well as John Cecil Rhodes. But anyway, we'll get to that later. But yes, the double cross, it was a system of basically controlling both sides. And most people who were working for the double cross didn't know they were working for the double cross. The double cross never went and met you and introduced themselves. They just allowed you to carry on doing what you were doing, because, it perpetuated the war. Now, I put it to everyone that double cross system is still in operation today, but it's no longer about spies and espionage. It's moved on to social media influencers, podcasters, researchers, vloggers, celebrities. It's now gone into that world. And I'm pretty sure that me and Emily work for double cross in some way, but we don't know it. Well, we do know it now. We're talking about it. But we're feeding into that game of perpetuating the nonsense.
Okay.
And
okay.
Go on, jump in.
Go ahead. Well, I just wanted to. I did show the pictures of J.C. Masterman and of Cecil John Rhodes, but I there was one thing that you said that I just completely forgot what I wanted to say. What was I wanting to say? I don't remember. So finish what you were saying, and maybe it'll come back to me.
Um, what else is there to add to it? I mean, you're like this. JC Masterman was in Wimbledon. He played in Wimbledon at some point. But what else can I say? I mean, yeah, it's just a system of getting people to believe that they're actually fighting against each other when they're not. We're all getting controlled by one organization. Now, when I've watched 1,000,001 World War II like documentaries, they kind of keep this part quiet that the British are in control of the whole adver, which is the German intelligence services. I mean, that's a pretty big deal, right? Because they essentially had the means to tell them whatever they wanted to know. And yeah, chicken feed is a big part of that, which is, what you'd have to do is like feed them chicken feed again and again, and then you'd slip in misinformation. And because we're like 100 times their chicken feed is checked out, right? Because it will check out. They'll give them information. I'm going to use World War II as an example. Say, I don't know, a plane is going to fly from London to Edinburgh on Thursday the 13th. And then they send one of their double-cross agents or a person who thinks he's just a genuine agent over there. He sees that the plane has flew off. And then another agent in Edinburgh sees it's landed. It checks out. It all checks out. They have to give you information that checks out. So when they do throw you some misinformation, you'll kind of put it down. Well, 30 times I was right. We were right. The information was right. There was just this one. So for me, who's kind of very new to this whole kind of conspiratainment world, I think that most of it is chicken feed.
Okay.
It's just
yeah.
Yeah.
Now I kind of sort of remember what I was going to say. This double cross or the double X, I think Michael has identified this in relationship with British intelligence. I don't know if you looked at some of the information that he was doing about 2 years ago, where he was talking about like, what's his name? Pierce Morgan. And I think he may have even mentioned Simon Cowell. But he was talking about this X information, right? And it was actually a project that had to do with like radio stations and talk show dissemination and different things like that. And he had identified this X as part of it, just one. He didn't say double, right? But he was alluding to the same thing that you're alluding to when you say double X in some ways. So we see that has presented itself. And then there's also, and I don't know if you ever pay any attention to Dark Journalist, who symbolizes himself with one X. And he talks about what is called X steganography. Do you know what that is?
No, tell me.
Okay, so I struggle quite a bit with Dark Journalist, but there is a few little nuggets buried inside of his material. And one of the most important things, but it is the part that I think gets him the least amount of attention and the least amount of views, though I think it is possibly the only part of his work, in my opinion, that really matters. And also, even within that, you have to burrow through the chicken feed aspect of it, right? But essentially, X steganography is hiding something within a work that is the actual information trying to be conveyed to others who are in the know, right? That is sort of buried within a work of art or a story or a chicken feed that will be very appealing to a massive amount of people, right? So it's basically it's basically a form of cryptography of hiding the message in plain sight, right? For other agents to pick up on, so that you don't have to have direct communication with them, right? But it's buried amongst the like, nonsense, right? So right. So
let me just I'll just jump in there. So when you said about it gets the least amount of likes and attention, this is what I'm saying. Like in the modern day double cross, that how they reward you is they don't pay you with cash or with a pat on the back from your handler. They'll give you likes and subscribers and payment through whatever subscription when you're saying stuff that they want you, that matters to them. When you're saying something that might be kind of on the what they don't want you to know about, they'll make sure it gets no attention. We all know that the British intelligence service has got the 77th Brigade, which can flood the internet with, you know, 1,000,000,001 bots, right? So you might think you're appealing to thousands, hundreds of thousands of people with your whatever, your quirky video you've made on YouTube, but actually it could be nothing, it could be everything. You get what I'm saying?
Okay, I think I may have begun speaking while I was still on mute. And I don't know if you hung up because you weren't hearing me or because you got disconnected, but I think I had forgotten to unmute myself.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, so I was explaining steganography. So I'm going to start again just so you can hear what I said. Steganography,
Yeah.
technique of hiding secret data within an ordinary non-secret file or message in order to avoid detection. The secret data is then extracted at its destination. The use of steganography can be combined with encryption as an extra step for hiding or protecting data. So you can do this in all kinds of things, including art, right? There's like steganography art, right? Which is like what you'll see, like when someone says, oh, there's like a code in Mona Lisa's eye and stuff like that, right? So steganography is the art as well as the science of communicating in a hidden way. It is referred to as transmission security or transec in military literature. Its goal is to hide messages inside other harmless messages in such a way that an enemy would not even know a second secret message was present. Okay. And so when dark journalist does this, he often will have he'll do a 3-hour live stream, right, on his X series. And he always connects everything back to the UFO file, right? Like everything is somehow connected to the government hiding and refusing to do UFO disclosure in an honest way or whatever, right? And he'll call this the UFO file. But at some point, not in every show, I don't listen to every show. I only the way I listen to him occasionally because for some reason, when I look at the thumbnail going through my YouTube feed, I get a hit that there's going to be something in there for me, and I'll listen only until I get it, and then I will stop, right?
Yep.
And at some point, he'll have a few sentences where he talks about X steganography or steganography. And I will notice that almost nobody in the chat room is commenting on that, right? The people in the chat room are most concerned with the discussion of UFOs, the discussion of government corruption, the discussion of whatever mystical teacher he's speaking of, whether it be Steiner or Edward Case or Gurdjieff or whatever, like some other aspect of it, and like almost no discussion about like how do we understand this steganography? Like why are we not learning to do it, right? There's never any it just gets rolled over because it's not as like seductive or interesting. There's not like a story about it, right?
Yeah.
So like he's literally displaying the art of steganography by doing that to a certain extent. He will say one sentence in a 3-hour podcast, in my opinion, that is like meaningful and provides some information, right? Not necessarily a lot of information, but I think the overall message being conveyed, whether he knows it or not, right, is that the whole topic of UFOs in the way it's presented in the media and from the government and whatever is basically a file or a way to hide other information that is somewhat relevant, and that, you know, like, because of the kind of reaction, emotional reaction people have when you talk about UFOs or aliens, they don't ever pay attention to the only meaningful part of whatever is in there, right? They either think something is happening to them and being done to them, or they're all excited because they like the idea of UFOs or aliens or whatever it is. It gets them all excited. And I'm going to talk about this getting all excited in a minute. And no one ever finds the one meaningful sentence in the news report, in the released document, or whatever. And said meaningful sentence or word never has anything to do with aliens or UFOs. And no one pays any attention to that part.
So what's your I hear what you're saying, but what's your thinking behind that? What is that? More the people listening are not quite.
This is how
getting it down it.
Well, I think
what you're saying.
Okay.
Go on.
So this is the people you're talking about, right? The double cross agents, right? Or the double cross, this kind of thing. This is the way that they communicate with each other. So they therefore never have to establish an actual connection whereby somebody could find that there was an email between them, or a phone call, or a meeting in physical space, or anything like that, right? They communicate the most meaningful information absolutely openly, right? And they bury it amongst information that is salacious or excitatory in nature, because they know that once somebody gets excited about something, their ability to accurately assess what is there is out the window, right? So this is the way that they have maintained their secrecy and dominance, and allowed the rest of the world to go on thinking that it's the Americans or the Chinese or the Germans or the Russians or whatever. Because for some
100%.
reason, despite the fact that, like, the highest level of dominance that has ever been displayed in what we understand as our reality is from these people, but nobody gets their panties in a wad about British intelligence or the crown, whatever, the same way they do about the Russians, the Chinese, or, you know, in some cases, the Americans or the Iranians or the Germans or whatever, right? There's something, for some reason, perceptively non-threatening about the way the British Empire, the Double X, the Crown, it's like all part of that kind of thing, does their shit, that is not either as captivating or as off-putting, whatever way, right? And this is through and through in all of their expressions of celebrity and fame. Think about it, right? Like very, very seldomly are the biggest celebrities or stars or whatever, or the most hated politicians or whatever, Brits. They're always Americans or Russians or Chinese or someone else from Latin America, someone with more fire, right? The Brits do not display the same level of charismatic fire that some other cultures and whatever do. And that has provided them very deep cover for doing what you're talking about.
Are most of your audience, would you say, are American?
No, I have people all over the world. Some of the locations people that I have subscribers and patrons and stuff from are surprising to me, just in terms of the span. But I'd say that probably 50% American, and then the other 50% spread about other places.
Okay, well, I might offend a lot of Americans here, and I might hurt some American feelings here. But yeah, I'm with you on that one. And what I find is, like, most conspiracy talk is American centric. It's mostly run by American patriot types, Christian patriot types, and they either want to believe that America is the good guy, the top of the good guys, or they'll want to be the top of the bad guys. They want to think that the CIA is running everything. Most of these American conspiracy theorists podcasts and stuff, they can quite entertain the idea that it's World War II Nazis are running America, that it's the CCP are running America. Yeah, Russian interference, Anunnaki space aliens. They're quite happy with that. But from my experience, when I actually say no, it's always been the British, their heads explode. There's that programming of American independence. They cannot bear to stand the idea that Britain is actually still running America. And what I'll add to that is I'm pretty sure the whole reason the British set up America, the American military, the CIA, is to be the straw man that takes all the slings and arrows of what the British Empire is doing. So the CIA gets the blame for everything when they're not really running anything. Sure, there's a CIA exists. There's people working in CIA offices, but they haven't got a clue what's going on. They're just turning up to their every day and getting a paycheck. But yeah, the double cross are well above there. And yes, they'll make it look like it's the Chinese, the Russians, and the Americans. So, and also that's kind of my like moron testing conspiracy is when everyone kind of, anyone that says, I heard Joe Rogan say this the other day. When he's talking about UFOs, he goes, who do you reckon it is? The Americans, the Chinese, or the Russians? And I'm just thinking, man, you like you just said, the biggest empire that ever existed, the guys that wrote the book on espionage, economic hitman stuff, they don't even get a mention. That's how good they are. They've programmed the masses to not even include them in the conversation. And, behind the scenes, the budget Britain spends on espionage and intelligence is way more than the Russians and the Americans spend on tanks and fighter jets and stuff, And also, like, they've got things like, Elon Musk's Starlink. I'm pretty sure that's Skynet. That's the Britain's satellite communications technology just being sold for civilians as Starlink, So yeah, they're definitely there like a shadow, like a hidden hand. They're kind of puppeteering people. That's what my little picture is. That's the double cross right there. People getting puppeteered. So the Americans fighting the Russians, that was always Britain's kind of way of running the world. And in my opinion, World War II was Britain's way of faking their own death and setting up their shadowy kind of presence within China, Russia, and the USA.
Yeah,
over to you, Emily.
I completely agree with that. I think the most effective mind control program ever launched by anyone anywhere was American patriotism. Right. And then within that, like the highest sect of it is the Christian American patriotism, because that's like the double whammy. Right. And I think it blinds people. I think it's like an effective ceiling because they like for certain people, they cannot go past that. They cannot go past their belief in God and country. Right. And so that automatically creates separation where like you can sell the cheapest chicken feed to them, and then you only have to worry about like more nutritional chicken feed for the people who are outside of that plantation, which is increasingly smaller the fewer you go out, right? To the point where like you have a few people running around, on a high, who have like eliminated all the carbs from their diet or eating mostly protein and fat, but still, like I don't have any delusion that you or I are still not confused. We're just we're farther out on the range, right? For whatever reason, right? Not because we're better or anything like that, but for my personal, like I was done a huge service by my parents by not being raised with religion. So I didn't have to overcome that one. I only had to overcome the like government part, which in my family was never patriotic, right? Like my family was never a woo-woo America kind of thing, right? So just the belief in government had to be overcome, not that ours was the best, right? So for all my complaints about my parents, they did a few things right. But yeah, no, I think that is correct. And I want to give you a few examples of like I have certain things that I monitor and measure just in my little reality, that when I see something happening there, then I can see how it relates to the world at large. And I talk about tennis and dance music, and to a lesser extent, gymnastics or food and cocktails or whatever. But these are the things that are my other interests that I can see the parallels in. And when I see them on the small mock-up, I know what it means on the big stage, right? So when I sent you the email saying that I wasn't with you before, but like I hadn't had every box checked yet that like, yeah, I'm willing to say that like, I think this is the thing completely, right? So there has been a huge rise in British gymnastics, okay? The Brits have never been good at gymnastics. Like Brits are to gymnastics what they are to like fine dining cuisine. It's like non-existent, right? Like British don't have a high cuisine of their own. They might have good restaurants in London that are Chinese or Italian or French or whatever. But like British food in and of itself is pretty like mundane. Would you agree?
Yeah.
Okay, so is their gymnastics always been. But over the last, it's been the rise has been going on for several years, but when it snapped my attention, there was just a World Championships a few weeks ago, and both the men's and the women's team were on the medal podium as teams. There is no more Russia. There is no more China. There is no more Romania, right? There is Britain and the United States in women's gymnastics, and I think Italy was the third one. And then for the men, I do think Japan may still have been up there. I don't think the American men are terrible, but the Brits are on both podiums. Like, when the hell has that ever happened? Right? And the rise has been happening for a while. But this is like, gymnastics can be symbolic of sort of the mental gymnastics that one has to go through to understand some of this, right? The sort of physics bending, it's what you're talking about, right? This sort of like double cross, you have to be able to like imagine it multiple ways. But when I saw the British presentation of the World Championships, right? And the way, like, literally, you had these two who were former British gymnasts who were really the first ones to achieve a success. One's name is Beth Tweddle, and the other's name is, I can't think of his name right now. Oh God. I can't think of it, but he's the one who started having success and winning world championships and Olympic titles in the last several years on floor and pommel horse. I can't think of his name right now. So they were interviewing them before they started. They're not competing anymore, either of them. Right. But now there's this full successful teams of people and all, it's bizarre, right? All of the traditional powers in those sports are gone. America was never a power in gymnastics until like 20 years ago, right? It was always like the Russians, the Romanians, the Chinese, at one point, the East Germans, blah, 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 right? This symbolized to me that the double X or the British Crown or whatever is ready to reassert a little bit more of their known dominance. Like, I feel that's coming, right? They've been sitting in the background for a bit. I don't think they'll always do it secretly, right? Like, I think that they, at a certain point recognized that they had made some mistakes and decided to pull back and start doing this orchestration from behind. But I think we're going to see a moment where they're going to try and overtly assert some more power in maybe a different way than we expect, right? But this weird rise in the gymnastics was like, okay, this is fucking weird. Hold on just a second. John Brisson is texting me because I'm also going to talk to him a little bit about Whitney Webb, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. Let me just tell him let's see. Hold on a second. Yes, 12:30 your time. Okay, so then I started thinking, but these British gymnasts, they're not like super flashy and charismatic the same way some of the Americans have been over time, or like even Russians, although Russian charisma is very different than American charisma or whatever, right? And then I started thinking about the tennis. So there is a rise going on in British men's tennis. there's a gentleman named Cameron Norrie, who's not a Brit, but competes for Britain, right? And he, he's been going really far in slams and competitions. He has zero charisma whatsoever, right? But he's there at every tournament, knocking out bigger, better players than one would think he is. And there's a young guy coming up named Jack Draper, right? But if you think about all of the British tennis stars over the years, Andy Murray, Tim Henman, they're never like this, like super charismatic one that gets like all of the world's attention. They may get the British media's attention. Like Andy Murray does not have that same flash as Nadal or Federer or even Djokovic, even though he was there competing with them for all this time. It's always understated. It's always working in the background, chipping away, always there, but never the star, right? Like it's very much the style of how they gain prominence. Mm-hmm. Right? So I was looking at that. And then I've had this, it's very interesting. I was noticing this. It became clear to me in my mushroom trip the other day, which I'll tell you about in a little bit. But I've had a lot of interaction recently with Indian men. Okay. And I've been talking to one of them about something. And then the other is something I just observed. I'm kind of obsessed with watching this Netflix show called Chef's Table. Right. And I was watching the documentary about an Indian chef, right, who's like really into modern cuisine. And he brought out the point that all of the things that people think of as Indian cuisine are not. They're British colonial takeover of India through like destroying the diet of Indian people. Curry, naan bread, all of these things that people think of when you think Indian cuisine were never originally Indian cuisine. That was how that culture was taken over, through the introduction of legumes and carbohydrates and lectins and all of that kind of stuff. They colonialized their bodies in order to colonialize the land, right?
Yep.
Along with opium and all of this other, British East Indies kind of shit and whatnot, right? And so this guy, the moment he won the best chef in Asia award, he's like, I'm never serving that food again. I'm never going to serve a naan, a curry, a tikka masala, any of that shit in my restaurant again. Right? Kind of thing. Like he recognized what he had to do to climb to the top of the heap. And then he's like, now I'm never doing it again. Right? Because that's not Indian food. So these deceptive ways of sort of maneuvering have presented themselves in like a lot of the markers. Right. And same even with the dance music, even though like dance music, the way that I like it largely comes from Great Britain or the UK, with the exception of like a few. Carl Cox is obviously a big star, and Paul Oakenfold, I think, is British. He's a big star. But when you talk to real dance music people, like it's always other people, other DJs, German, Swedish, Latin American, even though like the sounds that people are largely influenced by stem back to a lot of the early stuff, in London as well as in Germany and America, which is where people more think of it, some of this stuff from, right? I'm not saying I have that completely exactly right, but like I think of the music that is the most meaningful to me, that I really, really like, and a lot of it is from England. Right. And those DJs are not famous and not on the tour all the time. They play very rarely. Right. It's like a different, but all the people who are really good DJs, they all know they all know who those people, right? They're all influenced by that. It's just like a different way. Like we all know that, the Mossad or the Sayeret Makal's saying is, by deception, we shall rule. Right. But like, it's almost like the British intelligence or the double X is like, by seeming mediocrity, we shall infiltrate or something like that. Right. Like it's weird, but I think it's right. Like there is no evidence. There is no compelling evidence that the United States ever separated from British rule. There's no convincing evidence of that. It's just a story.
It's a story.
It's like the
But
original
let me,
UFO disclosure.
yeah. And let's just like let's go through like our alternative history, or maybe more of an honest history, okay? And we're talking about India. India is an important part in that. You know, Britain tried to rule India with a heavy hand, with military garrisons, an iron fist, you know, troops on the street, and it never worked. They were constantly fighting rebellions, and it was just a non-stop spinning plates, and they were constantly failing. Where with America, they actually created the illusion that they beat the British, you know, and that worked a lot better. If you let people think that they've won, like the USA, their whole history is built on this illusion that they actually kicked the British out. It rules itself. Whereas if you go in overtly, like you did with India, like they did with India, boots on the ground, it doesn't work. This is what I'm saying, like with the whole deception of war altogether. Britain learned years ago the whole bombs, bullets, and troops on the ground is the most least effective way to control the country. You're better off doing it the illusion, deception way, like you did with America, and they're doing that everywhere now. And just for people listening, us people living in Britain, we're not in on this. The way they get us is they keep us all in poverty in Britain. So the idea sounds ridiculous that Britain runs the world. And when people come here, they go, oh my God, this is a third world country. They're not running nothing. It's the whole illusion that we don't realize that actually London is the center of the world. And that's another reason they pump so much money into the USA, you know, with Big Macs and Ray-Ban sunglasses and Cadillacs. It's to give them the illusion that they're running the show with these superficial nonsense things, you know?
Yeah, the impression that most Americans, I think, have of Brits is like that they're just these sort of like bookworm, like nerdy, skinny, pale white guys with bad teeth, right? Kind of thing, like fairly ineffectual, right? And so nobody thinks of them as threatening, right? And in fact, like the ones that are not that, the ones that are wealthy, the Americans are always impressed by their accent, right? Like that's the thing. It's like, oh, I like the way these people speak, so I'm going to listen to them. They must be somehow smarter than us, and because they're so ineffectual, like their intelligence is pure and not manipulative or whatever the fuck it is, right? Like, yeah,
that's part of it. The Hollywood, what I call the Hollywood depiction of a British person, this Hugh Grant archetype, right? But you know, he's on the brink of a mental breakdown. He's a borderline homosexual. He's a wimp. No, there's very rarely do you meet people like that here in real life. That's the, like you said, that's the image Americans want, and it helps the double cross give that illusion that, you know, yeah, like you said, everything you just said, yeah, and that's Hollywood's part of that. Hollywood's selling this stereotypical person that doesn't really exist over to America as well. And a lot of our politicians as well don't really represent real British people. Like there's I've never met a fucking Boris Johnson type person in my life. That's a fictional character. This kind of Oxford, whatever it is, Oxford posh guy drinking a cup of tea, blah, 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 blah. You know, they don't really exist, man. The vast majority of this country is very working class, tattooed up. We've got a big steroid problem over here. Hooligans, you know, it's a very most people come here outside of London are very shocked, and they say third world countries get thrown around a lot. So yeah, it's all part of the illusion of projecting a false reality onto the world.
So the other thing that is part of my analysis here is there's a new television show called The Peripheral. Have you seen it?
No.
All right. So
tell me.
Huh?
But please tell me about it.
Okay. So it's a back and forth between the United States and London, right? And it's basically that the London is controlling time from the future, and they're creating these alternate timelines for a variety of different reasons. But the like literally one of the buildings that I have zeroed in on as interesting to me in my researches and talked about on shows in this show is the building where underneath the ground there's like some fucking weird time crystal that they're like using to control temporal reality through the sort of connection with people's genetics via their lens of their eye, right? Like there's more to it than that, right? But they're dealing with like incredibly high augmented reality technology. Okay. It's a real, for a variety of reasons, it's a really interesting show, and it's worked its way into my narratives in a variety of ways. But you know, that it very much is speaking to what you are talking about, right? Like they're not conducting warfare the military way, but they are invading the technology of the warfare being conducted by the US military. And that's part of the story as well, right? It's very much the connection between like Tavistock, Stanford Research Institute, the wealthy XX British Crown, and American military story, but told in this very sort of interesting futuristic kind of way. It's a really good show. And then for me, there's this very bizarre connection between personally, because one of the producers of the show is a very strange figure in my life, and I didn't know that was what she was doing. I talked about it in the show. I don't know if you heard. It was a show I did with Jeff where I talked about this person named Bronwyn Garrity. I'm not going to repeat it for now because people have heard it, but if you haven't seen it, it's in one of the dumps of like maybe a couple of weeks ago. I'll figure out which one and send it to you. But it's pretty interesting. But yeah, like while everybody is like busy looking for, well, Britain is not a very effectual military and they're literally in that show with technology that makes reality appear and disappear by having people like wipe their fingers against themselves, right? Like just rub their fingers together, right?
Emily, are we gonna go really wild now, or should we hold going wild off later on? Because I think that's it. That's it right there. Britain has got that's the City of London as that organization, whatever they are, whether they're human, we don't know if they're humans or AI or vampires. They have got time travel technology, and that's how they keep all the American Freemasons and the Chinese Freemasons in check. Because I'm sure there's some egotistical, Freemason in China, in Beijing, thinking, man, let's take London out, man. It's our turn to roll. And it's just, they'll just, send a nuke over. London will just rewind time and go take them people out. You've given away what you're going to, I think that is it. And, Greenwich is the 0 point of the world, right? Officially, everyone agrees that Greenwich, the place in London, that's the 0 point, right, on the coordinates. And everyone's time goes either minus or plus of that 0. So why is the whole world running off British time? Why is the whole world's coordinates, longitude and latitude of the world in agreement with London? It goes to show you it's all there when you look,
Well, coordinates.
But I don't know if you want to go really wild later on or not, Emily. I don't know.
Coordinates are exactly what this is about. Like literally, like Templars are time travelers. The Order of Temple Orientalis is people who know how to order time by orienting themselves inside of it. That's what Freemasons are. They have figured out how to arrange them. Like there's different methods. You can arrange time around yourself, or you can orient yourself in a temporal reality, right? And it's the people who have figured out the math and the coordinates, the things that the sound and the light hitting off of each other, right? Points to focus on that, to array a reality around it. That's what it is, right? And it allows literally any meaningful point in space or time, and there's a variety of things that can imbue something with meaning, to allow for an arrangement of a reality around it that people can experience. Now, some of those are pocket dimensions, pocket realities that one has to gain entrance into through knowledge or variety of other ways. but others have been created and designed for the everyday people to move around within. And then within that, there's various ways of augmenting, projecting, all of that kind of stuff. This is all like literally light and sound technology, and that's what these people control. They control light, sound, space, and time, the sacred geometry of space, time, and sound, and all the rest of it, all the other like information and all this kind of stuff that our attention is drawn to is the chicken feed that you're talking about, right? And to various degrees. And it's not that none of the chicken feed can be informative at all, right? But the vast majority of it is gruel.
Yeah. I mean, when you look at the whole conspiracy world, most of them are just living on a diet of chicken feed, which is, and like last week was a prime example of the whole Kanye West Balenciaga nonsense. It just goes to show you how much of, I mean, you're not on Twitter, Emily, but it was just insane how they gobble up this chicken feed and they just love it, and it's just, they don't seem to be content in moving upwards and onwards and looking at, the bigger picture within themselves or within who's running this reality or how you are going to, be the best you can, be the Neo of this matrix. They're not, so,
okay. Do you want to
just,
oh, sorry.
Just wait, one last thing.
Yeah.
One last thing. When you were talking about steganography, and I know you've been talking a lot lately about Pythagorean architecture.
Yeah.
Well, I think these fuckers are now doing Pythagorean black magic now through numbers through the internet.
100%.
I think they're no longer interested in building the buildings anymore because they're just throwing out these news stories. And this is what I was doing a lot before I was Mr. Ukraine. I was pointing out the amount of 33s and 666s and that you'd find in news stories. It's just hitting everyone subconsciously and they don't even know it. So most of the, you go on YouTube right now and you see the top stories, it will always be these funky numbers, man. And that right there, I don't know what we want to call it, Pythagorean digital architecture, I don't know. But a lot of that is controlling the masses as well, keeping them in a building, if you like, but within the minds, within the digital space,
the memory palace. Yeah. It's like there is. This is part of why I am so focused on the architecture in my city right now, because I recognized what you're talking about. Right, they're busy doing that on the internet with the information, which means that like to go around and explore the actual Pythagorean palaces or sacred geometry of space, time, and sound that is something that is more meaningful, that is probably of more interest to people like you and I. That's an open field right now. And it's interesting, right? Like there's some people, since I have started really getting into this, who are really into what I'm doing, and others, because it's not conspiratorial in that excitatory way, right, are not interested in what I'm talking about anymore. And that is fine with me, right? Like this is, if they can keep people inside and on the internet, they don't have to have vaccine passports or this, that, and the other, like rule out in the physical space, right? And so literally the access to other dimensions can be right out there because it doesn't excite the central nervous system in the same way the information that you're talking about does, right? People prefer to stay inside and argue about Kanye West and Balenciaga and Alex Jones and whatever the clots from the vaccine and the this and that and whatever, right? And like the ability to understand how space and time work is like literally never been easier for out there. I don't think. I think we're going to be able to figure out things that like would have been much harder for our parents or whatever to, because it's in plain sight. And that's how good the mind control is that people are ignoring is right in front of their face for the numbers and algorithms that you're talking about.
Yeah. And in relation to the double cross, the 20 committee, do you know the building? I think it's called 20 Finch Church Street. It's the walkie-talkie building in London.
I'm looking it up right now.
Do you know of it? my God, this is like a weapon. Apparently, it's been knocking people off their feet from the wind, and it's been shooting out a laser beam, melting cars. You know,
Okay, let's see. Okay, council,
literally a weapon building. You know,
right? Yeah. This one here.
yeah. It's had the name like the Walkie Scorchy, where it's just been melting cars below it, and then it's been. I think the other nickname was like the Walkie Windy or something like that. Where it's been knocking people off their feet because it smashes it makes the wind go right down where it's literally blowing people over. And I'm like,
Look at that. Look at
crazy.
the
What's it called? 20 Fenchurch.
20 Fenchurch Street.
Yeah. That could be that could be underneath. That could be the home of the 20 committee. I don't know, and we don't know what the 20 committee are. That could be 20 AI supercomputers. It could be 20 vampires.
Right.
It could be 20 albino mutants. Right? We don't know.
Yeah, look at that. I've seen this building before, but I haven't focused in on it. Like it's in the cityscape when I'm looking at some of the other buildings that have got my attention. Okay, walkie-talkie.
For anyone listening, it's an ugly building. But if you look on like news stories about it, you'll see it's nothing but a pain in the ass. Where it's like melting cars and stuff, you know, in the summer.
Look at yeah. No, all right. I'm gonna do some further looking into this because wow, look at this one where a portion of it is blacked out.
Yeah. And Emily, that's probably they probably did that to stop the laser beams deflecting. They apparently had to spend money on it. But you know, what is a walkie-talkie? You know?
Yeah.
Sending out communication. Just like the 20 committee did in World War II when they would just endlessly send out Morse code out into the ether, knowing deliberate misinformation and chicken feed, knowing the Germans will pick it up.
Look at this. Look at this. Okay, so this is like literally what you're talking about. This is almost like Morse code across it. Look at the way some of the lights are on in some of the offices. And if you look at that, then it's literally like that's like an algorithm or a code in the same way. I don't know if you've seen any of the shows where I'm talking about these buildings are genetic marker tests and equalizers on electronic musical instruments. They're measuring frequencies. They're emitting and receiving and showing on their outside what they're doing. Like we're literally looking at the thing that the thing is doing. Right?
Yep.
That's crazy.
It's a giant black cube. And what is the thing that's controlling people at the moment? Their pocket black cube,
right?
i.e. their smartphone. And this is just the mother of all smartphones right there, just in the middle of London. And it's 20, coincidence or not, it's number 20. XX right there.
Yep.
Oh, and another thing about XX, Roman numerals, it's probably the same people that were running the Roman Empire. They probably, when that fell down, they jumped over to London. It's probably a connection there. They probably purposely chose Roman numerals as well.
Yeah. Do you look at this? Look at this picture. This picture. Remember the old Nokia phones?
Yeah.
That looks exactly like a Nokia phone. Let's find
5210. Is it 5210?
I think it said. Let's go. The address is 20 Fenchurch Street. Okay.
No, sorry. The Nokia model is a 5210, which
so
in
here's
the UK was like the first.
21. Yeah, that's it, right? That's the one I'm mostly thinking of. Here's one that looks a little more walkie-talkie like, but the shape of the building is this.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we want to go buck wild first, or talk about like the example of Whitney Webb here? Because when you said what you said, it was one sentence you said to me, and then everything clicked into place as far as like what we're looking at and why I feel so conflicted about her. So do we want to talk about that first, or do you want to go buck wild first?
Whatever you want, my friend. Whatever you want, boss. I reckon Whitney Webb. Let's go Whitney Webb.
All right. So Whitney Webb. So when you my point in the show with Danny that you commented on is like, there's this always from day one, the first time I ever listened to her or read her articles, while my intellectual mind was like verifying the probable truth of what she's saying, and some of what she says I even like because at that point it still excited certain receptors in my system, right? Like there was this weird uneasiness about her for me and the way she presented information or whatever. And still to this day, though I'm going to be talking to John Brisson after you, I don't know if we're recording or just having a personal chat. Like when someone tries to explain to me why she is an agent or a liar or whatever, a psyop, the thing that they offer to me as proof doesn't really tell me anything, and to me more signifies that like people don't even know what a psyop is anymore. Like they've lost the ability to even like, you know, just saying the person is that somehow becomes the proof that they're that. Like I haven't seen this like linkage of like, this is how we know that what she's saying is bullshit, or that she's lying, or that she's intentionally omitting with nefarious intent, you know, some portion of the story that some other person thinks is important, right? No one has been able to make that case well to me, but I still feel this uneasiness. So when you said what you said, my mind went to this, and I think this kind of sums it up. She's telling the truth about a fake story. So, right, like it is, you said that Jeffrey Epstein was a fake person, right? And so like there's all of this information generated around Jeffrey Epstein, whether you're the person that gets your panties in a wad about the sexual deviance aspect or the financial corruption cartel aspect of it. There's all of this energy around that provides an endless supply of chicken feed for you to eat up. And if the person who's reporting on some part of it doesn't report on the part that you like, they're lying. Like they love this. They love this conspiracy. They love this thing. They don't even have to really like, they just created this Jeffrey Epstein person to do all of this stuff, whether he really did it or didn't do it. And they just said he did it. People are going and finding what they think are real documents and reporting on them. And at this point, why anybody would think that they haven't figured out that researchers go looking for the documents and start making fake documents is beyond me. Right. But I mean, maybe some people think that, but like mostly those conversations are reserved for people who are talking about biblical shit. Right. Is that a real document or is it faked? Right. So she's using research skills to dissect the information that is out there on the internet. Right. And she is drawing conclusions and connections that may be like reasonable in the traditional sense of like logic and reason. But if the information is all made up or just intentionally put out there for them to do that, it doesn't matter. So it is a truthful reveal about a fake story. Is that right? Do I have that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's real to her. It's real to her. She's not just. So I did a terrible job of explaining the double cross at the beginning. Let me just roll back there. So when it came to double cross agents, they would often, like they mostly fit a certain profile, right? They were very narcissistic. They believed their own hype. They were driven by greed. And they're adventure seekers. So it's very easy for the British to control them because their own ego was being used against them. And if the British went and killed them type of people, there's a chance the Germans would have sent a higher caliber type of person. So that's why they didn't kill them, because they could easily control them. Now, when I say that, narcissistic, egotistical, driven by money, who do you think of? Joe Rogan, Russell Brand, Kanye West. They're very, very easy to control. So there's that part, okay? So let's just move that aside. Now, as for Whitney Webb, I've got nothing against Whitney Webb as a person. She seems really lovely. She seems really sincere. And I think she's being very honest in that she believes what she's fighting against, But and I haven't listened to her for ages, but the first time I ever heard her on the Higher Side chats, she kept saying, I've done a deep dive, meaning she went through the internet. So yet again, this is my main issue with the conspiracy world, is it's mostly based on stuff you've read on the internet. I've always had an objection with the first thing I ever saw about Epstein. I was like, this guy doesn't exist. He's purely being thrown out there, again, just a large piece of chicken feed to see how many people pick it up. And this is another way of the intelligence services way of tracking people. They'll throw out this thing and they'll see how far it goes. They'll watch it spread like a virus through the internet. And if you share that and comment and make a video, you're now entering into the double cross system, and they're monitoring you without actually monitoring you. They don't have to go through your emails because you're freely putting out a video on YouTube talking about Jeffrey Epstein. You've fallen for their op. So yeah, with Whitney Webb, it's real to her. She's not like in on it. Like I said in the beginning, the double cross doesn't come and approach you and say, "Hey, work for us. We'll give," and gives you a wad of money. It doesn't work like that. It's all hidden hand stuff, shadow stuff. So from Whitney Webb, yeah, she's very sincere and she probably really believes it, but she's not taking that step back and going, "Hang on, is this all just nonsense from online?" And yet, when you look at all of conspiracy, you kind of have to ask that about most of it. Were you there? Did you see Jeffrey Epstein touch up a kid? Did you see it with your own eye? And even that, even if you saw him, how do you know that wasn't like a Mission Impossible type mask? Rubber mask guy running around, because they'll do that as well. They'll put rubber mask people out there. They've got doubles. They've got all of that shebang. Yeah, that's it. Over to you, Emily.
Okay. So yeah, I agree with what you're saying. Like, I'm pretty much to that. Like, if it not that I pay zero attention to what comes through the internet, because, sometimes people on the internet are actually telling the story of something that they witnessed with their own eyes in real life. But like, for me, the exploratory playground at this point is the city in front of my eyes, right? Where I can go move around, walk around, touch things, poke things, rely on my own senses, which also can still be tricked, but are, like, you can monitor them over time, right? And sort of get some level of accurate information. So even within everything you said, I can get on board with everything you said. But even within the way she reports the story, and I almost sent you, there's a very short interview that I think got to the crux of it. Like, there's a lot of interviews with her out there right now on big platforms, including Paul Bet-David podcast and Glenn Beck podcast, that are interesting. But she also had like a 40-minute interview with Tom Woods, who's like a libertarian guy, right? And she said something there that I think is the steganography that even she doesn't realize. And that's where, right? At one point in the interview, and I'll link to it in the description of this, she talks about, and we know this, there is, part of the story with Jeffrey Epstein is his relationship to Bill Gates and his interest in genetic sciences and stuff like that, right? Mm-hmm. And she's talking about how he wanted to be in the Bahamas or wherever he was with the little St. John Island, and he wanted to collect the DNA of everybody there. And in her mind, that this is part of the whole vaccine or disease or virus control thing that might be as a bioweapon, or maybe as eugenics or whatever it is, right? And to me, the one part of the story about all of this that probably is that the hidden nugget is that this person was fascinated with genetics. There's also a quote of his where he says he wants to put did you ever hear the thing about how he wanted his own genetics or his own semen or something like that in all the vaccines? Did you ever hear that?
Yeah.
Okay. So he's wanting to spread his seed everywhere, and everybody goes to this perverse aspect of that. Everybody gets all Twitter-pated about some weird gross sexual thing, or man wanting to spread his seed, and some weird thing like that. What it sounds like to me when I hear about being interested in the genetics of a certain set of people, or wanting to spread his seed everywhere through vaccines or whatever, that I don't know if you've heard me talking about my theory about which realms are open to you are somewhat dependent on your genetics, that we live in this absolute multiple dimensional reality beyond anybody's ability to imagine it, right? That literally every time there is a light hitting off of some physical object in an interesting way, another reality is spawned, right? There's just a million, it's endless. It's an endless array, right? And it does have something to do with genetics, right? And so like the realms that may be open to you might be different than the ones that are open to me. We may have some common ones, right? Just kind of like when if you and I were working at the same hospital, because you work at hospitals sometimes, right? Like the rooms you could go into are based on your security clearance there, like and the ones I could go into are based on mine, but we can both go into the cafeteria and the main halls and the this and the that and whatever, right? It's like that with genetics. And for some reason, maybe there's some level or layer of reality that this people who existed on this island have access to. I mean, that isn't an area that's been thought of as Atlantis or the Bermuda Triangle kind of shit or whatever, that he's fascinated with and his genetics do not allow access to. So he's trying to study that shit. And we both know, or we all should know at this point from epigenetics, right, that genetic information moves back and forth in time. So if he can get his genetics into everybody, then through the retrocausality of epigenetics, he'll then be able to glean information about things that he otherwise wouldn't have been able to. By introducing your genetics into some genetics that prior to that you were walled off from, there opens a line of communication, right? And I think that this is like, when everybody is getting their panties in a wad about genetic warfare and they're trying to kill everybody and eugenics with the abortion stuff. And I'm not saying that there's nothing to those things, but when people get all excited about that, that's like the gate to like the front of the building, not the fucking like code to the safe hidden within the building, right? People get all up in arms about the chicken feed, right? And I think the interest in genetics, right? I think there's a connection between light, sound, and genetics that is the access point to a lot of these realities that are like the Danuben Belt and Man in the High Castle, the next world to be explored, and the next one, and the next one. Endless combinations of light, sound, and genetics, right? Opening up like prismatic realities and things like that. And this is where like the high level of science that we never talk about because we're busy arguing over, are they stealing children to have sex with them or whatever? Not like, what are they actually doing with the genetic material they're collecting, right? We get scared because we think they're trying to kill us or make us sick or force us to do something we don't want to do. And I'm not for any of those things. I'm against those things. But when we get upset about that part of it, we're not asking the question about why are they really doing this? I'm sorry, but like not 99% of the world are not perverted pedophiles. That's just not true, right? There's very few people that are like wanting to do that kind of stuff and wanting to do it all the time. But they'll let everybody think there's a whole class of people that like that's the whole point of their life is to do that, because then nobody ever pokes through that and is like, why are these people so interested in genetic material? Why? What is the real reason? Right? And you know, this is, so she talked about him collecting the genetics. And if you think about it, that's also like one of the things that's been said about what Google's ultimate goal was to collect everyone's genetic information, right? So we're all arguing about whether they're censoring our words. No one's talking about, hey, do they have all of our genetics and why would that be? And if they do have it, people are more concerned about being targeted and made sick or bioweapon. And I'm not saying they shouldn't be. I'm sure all that goes on. But like, what is it that they're really studying and why? What is the problem they haven't solved yet that they will go to any length to figure out? And every time we get upset about something that isn't that, we get stopped from getting to what is that. So She said within her interview that, so she dropped the part that is probably the most important thing about Jeffrey Epstein, if he is a real person in any way, shape, or form, or whatever the group is that he actually represents and what they're actually doing. And that is fascination genetic material.
I'll just jump in there. His bank account is real. So it's a way of buying stuff on behalf of the double cross, the City of London is doing it through these people. It's a bank account first, and they add a character to it. Bill Gates is a bank account. Elon Musk is a bank account. Because if you just knew that the City of London was buying up all the genetics and all the social media accounts, the game would be up, right? So they have to do it through these quirky characters. But anyway, sorry, I cut you off there. Go on.
So, but do you agree with this, what I'm proposing here, this theory?
That they're searching for genetic people, or they're searching for a certain group of people, or they're testing different genetics through portals. And yeah, I'm on board with that.
Right. Okay. So there's nobody who's focused on that portion of the Jeffrey Epstein content. So that would be the steganography of the Epstein file, like what we were talking about earlier with the UFO file and Dark Journalist, right? That would be okay. And there's perfectly good reasons why people get upset about sexual impropriety or pedophilia or financial corruption. Right. And I believe Whitney Webb when she says she doesn't want to be governed by organized crime. That's completely reasonable. Right.
Yeah.
I believe people when they're like, I want to stop bad sexual things from happening to children. Like most people do. Right. But they have decided that they don't care if we think they're all financial crooks and pedophiles, because as long as we're busy fighting that part, they have days, weeks, years, months, decades, centuries, and eons to continue what they're actually studying.
Yeah.
Right. And so they like this. They even came up with the name Pizzagate. Because when they do this, it creates a gate that people will never get past, because they're busy being upset about whichever part of the story triggers their central nervous system and makes them lose their ability to think about the next logical part.
Well, back to the stereotypical truther. The truther is obsessed with this idea that their neighbor has a child in their basement, nailed to a fucking upside down pentagram, right? They're obsessed with this. It seems to be on their mind 24/7. And yeah, you're right. It's probably very honorable. They want that to stop, but it's not actually, statistically speaking, happening as much as they think. And as well, I used to do a lot of, well, not a lot of work, but I spent 2 or 3 years working in like the youth sector, like residential support work for young people and stuff. So I had to do a lot of safeguarding courses and stuff. And this actual, statistically speaking, the stereotypical idea someone has of a paedophile, which is an old white man, is actually not correct. I don't know about in the USA, but over here in the UK, there's actually a lot more non-white males, actually quite younger, between their 20 and 25s, actually doing paedophile stuff. So yeah, again, the whole Jeffrey Epstein it fuels the obsession with the truthers of satanic pedophiles and Hillary Clinton, wearing a child's face. All this absolute horseshit. It's just not going to get you anywhere. And yeah, it just keeps them distracted. It's a jingly set of keys that keeps these kind of, to me, they're kind of NPC truthers, right? There's just as many NPC truthers as there are normie truthers. They're just busy with this nonsense. And like you said, we're not looking at anything deeper or more profound. So yeah. And yet again, so back to Whitney Webb, she's now highlighting this stuff and how the double cross system now works in today's age over social media. She will get spotlighted and thrown out into the public and projected onto YouTube recommendations and stuff. And there's probably a lot of money coming into her account because they want it. They want it to grow. They want, like you said, it's nonsense. They want it to keep people focused. So yeah, over to you, Emily.
Well, and she, like, in her mind, I think she's doing, she's trying to elevate people from getting so triggered by the sexual content that they start to pay attention to the financial criminal aspect. And she thinks that part is important, affects more people, and is probably like stands more of a chance of like making some societal improvement. So she thinks she's doing good work, and she probably is on some level. And then there's other people who will tear down that work because it's not feeding the part of the story that they like or that they think is most important or that jacks their system the most. So people will either be sent into exploring and doing deep dives, which she even invites people to do in the interview. She hasn't covered all of this, so do a deep dive and help me, right? To spend tons and tons of time chasing the dollars down, right? And so some people will be doing that, and others will spend a lot of time trying to prove why Whitney Webb is a psyop because she didn't talk about the part that they like or the part that they think is most important or whatever, right? And so
you're describing this as a double cross system. This is the British versus the Germans. This is it all over again.
All over again, right? And so then
all over again,
right? And so then the other part that is whatever they're actually studying. I think it's actually like whatever they're trying to learn, they're free to do that without anybody asking the right questions or getting to the answer first, right? That's the most important thing, is that they get to the answer first, because when they get to the answer first, then they can say they invented it, they own it, and then they can wield the way that they want to. And that's exactly what the British Empire has been doing all along, right? And they just let everybody else think that it's all this about something else or whatever. So, yeah, I think that the Whitney Webb thing is a really good case and example. And so do you have anything else to say about Whitney Webb, or are you ready to go a little bit buck wild before we wrap it up?
The name Whitney Webb.
Yes.
WW.
XX,
I'm
right?
always suspicious.
WX.
I'm suspicious of any...
Mm-hmm.
It's like a Sideways 33. It's like, where's Wally, Mickey Mouse, Marilyn Monroe.
Where's Waldo?
Marilyn Manson.
Oh, you're good, man. Where's Waldo? And Waldo has red hair too.
Right? That name. Whenever I've heard her, she sounds quite genuine, but that freaking name, man.
Right. That's a
then again, people pull my name apart because L equals 3, doesn't it? So
right. So the you went for a different aspect of her name, right? So WW also comes right before XX, W, X, Y, and Z, right? So WW is right.
Yeah, there's that. Yeah.
There's that aspect of it. Also, like Wonder Woman, which was a huge propaganda piece, right? And this is like, okay, let's elevate the chick telling this story. And I have no problem with that to a certain extent. So there's the Wonder Woman aspect of this, which is, I think, like Glenn Beck, without calling her Wonder Woman, basically alluded to the fact of how amazing she is and all this kind of stuff, right? But then there's also, you went a different way. Like my suspicion goes to, if you are a fan of Gary Webb, then her name Whitney Webb is going to make you think a certain set of things. And if you were or if you were a person who thought that the Gary Webb story was bullshit, then it might make you think a certain set of things. And then there's George Webb, right? Who, if you liked him, you'll think one thing. If you don't like him, you'll think another thing. And so, and it may be. Go ahead.
Yeah, go on.
These are all circumstances that, like, it's weird how this happens, but we don't even understand where we are. We don't understand who we are, where we are, what we're doing. And so the way things are named in this game, we don't understand yet completely, right? And so, like, calling something a certain thing is not just random. Parents named you something for a reason. If you adopt a fake name, you did it for a reason. But you still, like, why does that appeal to you? Why do those names appeal to you? Why does that moniker appeal to you? These are like deeply embedded symbols, right? Names. I'm about to put up a show that I did a few weeks back with this guy named Roman Merrill, who I like to call Roman numeral, right? And he was talking about the name Roman being a cipheric name, right? So it's like a cipher, it's a symbol, right? So this is like, we're getting into some like deeply rooted territory in terms of how a system tracks something across the dimensions of time and space and reality and all of that kind of stuff, right? And so it's, these are all factors, right? And it doesn't make a person good, bad, right, or wrong, but they're just all things to consider. If you think a certain thing or feel a certain thing when you hear a certain person or whatever kind of thing, there is some level of truth to that to be paid attention to and responded to.
Yeah, we can only speculate whether she genuinely chose that name because she's witty and she's setting out a web, or whether just it subconsciously happened, whether this is some sort of cosmic kind of joke, like Princess Di, she died, all these kind of weird names and stuff. It's like the script writers are fucking with us. We can only speculate, right? I know that I personally put Thor in my name because the god of war, and I always focus on war and stuff. So yeah. And also, do you know about Pythagorean numerology regarding letters? Like A is 1, 2,
Yes.
B is 2.
Yes.
Yeah. So I haven't run her name through the calculator. I didn't bother, but all of your people like Churchill, Kennedy, they always add up to 33 and stuff. So people that are planning names and birthdays and stuff, they plan this stuff. They plan them to come out on a certain day. The names add up to 33. Obviously, 33 is considered a master builder number in numerology. This also has ties to Freemasonry. Freemasons use 33 a lot. We don't know if that's, there's a lot of speculation about the number 3, whether it represents deception, maybe it represents time travel. We don't, so it's all part of that. So
speaking of what you said about just real quickly, what you're saying about that, about time travel, that's the other show you should watch if you get a chance. It's called Dark. And in Dark, right, they're time traveling in increments of 33 years.
There you go.
Right. And
33, that number, man.
Yeah, right. Check out that show. It's really good. It's a German show. It's dubbed in English, though, so you don't have to read the subtitles. You can listen, right? But it really pulls together a lot of the topics that we've talked about in terms of nuclear facilities and what's really happening there, and time distortions and what clocks have to do with it. And there's all kinds of stuff, right? So you should, that and the peripheral, if you get a chance to watch anything, those are the things to watch. Continue. I didn't mean to interrupt, but I wanted to say that before I forgot.
I'm writing that down, Dark and peripheral. Okay, can you do one last screen share? If you can go to Google Images and do cable and wireless map. Just writing cable and wireless map. I'm sure people have seen this image many, many times. Have you got it? Oh, wait, hang on.
Okay, which one are you looking for? Oh, yeah.
Sorry, map, M-A-P. M-A-P.
Oh, map. But look at that. There's a double cross. I typed in cable and wireless Mac, and there was a double cross to play with us. Look at that. And that way
everyone listening, you will see double crosses now in all of the iconic images coming through the mainstream media.
Well, it's also,
I guarantee you will see it in the background and
the quatrefoil that I talk about. But look at this. I was going to say something to you earlier, and that I think when they're like creating a system, right, like a closed system, like a temporal bubble or a spatial bubble, there's a cross on one end and a cross on the other end. And if you even look at this symbol, there's all this stuff between the two crosses, but on the front, the right and the left, the top and the bottom, the front and the back, however you choose to see it, there's the cross. It's like the opening and the closing, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so wireless map. Sorry, there we go. Let's see what you got now.
X marks the spot. It's jumping from one spot to another.
Yep.
Any one of them top ones. If you just click on it, right?
Okay.
As you can see, there's the London in the middle with their undersea cables going across the world like a web. And this is it, guys. That's the center right there. That's your Cthulhu. That's your octopus.
Yeah.
That's your
vampire squid,
Hydra.
The life out of humanity. Yeah.
While the whole world was looking at the USA and the USSR doing their fake, flying to the moon bollocks, Britain was laying down undersea cables, that's where you get most of your information. It's not actually through satellites.
Yeah.
this conversation right now is happening through a City of London Empire cable.
Yep. This is interesting.
So there it is, man.
Yep. Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
your web right there.
Yep.
Your net, your internet.
Your World Wide Web, right? WWW.
Yep.
Right.
www 666.
Yep. Okay. Let's move to the Buck Wild segment here. And like I will how did you want to go Buck Wild? And then I'll tell you what I wanted to tell you, but that was like the main takeaway I had from my mushroom trip the other night.
We kind of touched upon it. Yeah, I just you know, the City of London's got time travel. I'm certain of that now.
Yep.
They've got their time travel troops. And I don't know whether that's, you know, whether that's astral or mushrooms or whatever. Tenant, I think the film Tenant is a good example of that.
Yep.
You know, they've got the turnstile. You just walk in it, you walk out of it. You're going backwards in time. Inception, the suitcase, you can all just jump into it. I know I've heard you talk recently about this, and obviously Graham Hancock, about the DMT business where they're drip feeding it to you so you can stay in it for a long time. I actually heard that years ago through the book The Spirit Molecule.
Yeah, right. That yes. Yes, that, but
now
he was not giving an ongoing drip. What he was doing was giving massive doses intravenously, right? I think all at once. This is like small amounts, bigger, so the person can acclimate themselves to it. And then this is a little bit different. And I'm sorry, but like this is also is sorry, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I meant to say this earlier and I have to say
no, go for it.
This is
go for it. Yeah.
Double crown, right? Everybody, so the DMT experiment, and Graham Hancock is totally okay with this, is being done at the Imperial College of London, who gave us 2 weeks to fucking flatten the curve, right?
Exactly.
So this is like British Crown is totally okay with everybody being fuck Imperial College, fuck their modeling system for COVID, right? But what people don't really understand was that the modeling system and the 2 weeks to flatten the curve was completely 2 weeks to fucking destroy everybody's mind and make them act like lunatics, right? So that is completely, like, they're totally fine with everybody thinking Imperial College is buffoons because they accomplished their goal. And it's called fucking college. It's called Imperial College. It's the fucking British Empire, dude.
Right. How? This what I mean, Emily. How are these truthers not getting it?
Including
they don't want to get it.
Is like, yay for the people who controlled COVID, controlling exploration of time and space with drip DMT.
Yeah, man, I don't fucking trust it. I would never go near them. I would never step in that. Is it a building? I don't know what it is. I would never go anywhere near them. But yeah, I also think, Emily, this goes on to the wild, crazy stuff, that most of our economy is fake. You do accept that? Like 70% of our economy is fake. It's just bureaucracy, people pretending to work in offices and all that nonsense, right?
Everything except for you walking up to the corner store and like buying a sandwich is pretty much fake. Yeah.
Yeah, you could say like a farming is real, a construction worker is real, but the vast majority of just people are pretending to work.
Correct.
And and with the whole COVID thing, that was really highlighted, right? The whole world carried on working with everyone sat at home. How much more evidence you need? Your job just doesn't need to be there. I think we're going to move on to UBI, probably with the UK doing it first and everyone following as per usual, right? Imperial College London are probably running the figures right now. But I don't think the masses are going to be able to cope with the idea of just being given money. So I think everyone's going to have a TikTok job. I think everyone's income is going to be dependent on how much TikToking you're doing. And when I say TikToking, I'm talking in general about you just being online and deep diving fucking Epstein and whatever, you know? There's going to be a TikTok economy, an illusion-based TikTok economy where the more you give into a system, the more you freely give away about yourself, the more TikTok credits you're going to get, and so on.
I completely agree.
Yeah, I just want to get that in there.
Yeah, I completely
because
agree with that.
because the Ukraine war was said to be the TikTok war. We had that General Petraeus running around before the war started. General David H. Petraeus was the head of the CIA and the head of Afghanistan. And he was going around saying, yeah, this is going to be the first ever TikTok war. It's all going to be open source coming straight from TikTok. And yes, but what he really meant was this is the age of TikTok war where it's about everyone filming their life and giving their life away to the black cube, to the walkie-talkie.
Yeah,
Over to you, Emily.
yeah, and they're completely, that makes sense. I did a show with Sophia, I think it was last year, where she was talking about like having researched these TikTok influencer houses, right? Where they get a lot of people who are famous on TikTok together living in the same house to study them, basically, yep. Right? So yes, 100%. But also, there's only a few people who won't do that, right? The construction worker, the farmer, right? The small business owner. And these are the same people that won't go along with the dictates anyway. So the actual people who cannot be controlled on the same level as everyone else, who are doing real work, producing actual things, will be allowed to continue going on doing that because XX actually needs them, right? On some level, because we still live in buildings, we still eat food, all of this, whatever kind of thing. They don't want to eat the lab grown food. So if nothing else, the farmers need to produce the food they're going to eat, correct? And everyone else will die on TikTok and do everything that they're told. And they think that they're creating their own reality with the TikTok videos and blah, 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 blah. But if you look, the TikTok videos are like literally the people who are the big TikTok creators are all like now have Tourette's syndrome and shit like that, right? So it's just like, it's this weird feedback loop. But yeah, I mean, it is the people who had jobs that they needed to have go on for the most part. I'm not saying that this is not me lacking empathy or compassion for people who lost their jobs or saying that this is 100%. But they were not concerned about people who did jobs they needed to have done being around other people.
Yeah. Well, the real jobs were allowed to carry on. What we talking about the scandemic? I mean, yeah, the real jobs carried on. They just had to wear a mask, pretending to wear a mask when they went there. But the vast majority of people, yeah, they sat home. And we might not see this TikTok illusion-based economy in our lifetimes, but Gen Z are well on their way to just living that life. They can't, you can't get a Gen Zer off his phone, right? Off his or her phone. So they're well on their way. And, what comes after Z, it goes back round to A, and it'll be a whole new world of people freely. See, they don't have to, this is what I'm saying, they don't have to go into your emails. They don't have to hack your phone. These people are freely giving it away anyway. They're literally dancing in front of a camera every day for TikTok likes and views. Yep. It's only a matter of time before they convert it into spendable credits. But obviously, looking into the future, whether people actually still leave their houses in 100 years' time, I don't know.
Watch The Peripheral. Like you're gonna, let's reconvene after you watch The Peripheral because so many of the things you're talking about are present there, right?
Did the Peripheral steal my ideas again, like Westworld, and are they using my Twitter as a script?
Well, this is the part that's crazy. Is this Bronwyn Garrity chick this is a name that has been in my mind since I was a child. I don't know why. I don't know if I know her. The name has been in my mind, circulating around, sometimes excessively, since childhood. I believe, I don't know for sure because I'm still looking for the evidence. I believe she may have been a gymnast in Los Angeles that maybe I competed against one time or heard her name over the loudspeaker to meet. But for some reason, that name stuck in my mind. And it was one of the things that when I had serious issues with looping thoughts when I was on drugs, this was one of the names that would go through my mind repetitively. right? So I'm watching the Peripheral and I didn't even know if this, like, why this name was in my mind. I'm watching the Peripheral episode 3. Her name pops up as the fucking producer. I do the Pythagorean numerology or gematria that you mentioned earlier on her name, and the return I get is, this is the only point on your timeline that matters. It's a fucking weird name, right? Bronwyn Garrity. Like, why would that be circulating in the mind of someone who either never met her or maybe met her once, right? And it seems like from her, she's done work on a lot of the shows that we watch. So the stories are probably largely coming from her, and her seems to come from the same place as me, right? And so whatever this is, I don't know. Right. But check it out. Like, it is going to speak to you on every level, and then we can kind of reconvene about some of this. But yeah,
okay.
I can get on board with just about everything you're saying here. I had so I had an interesting mushroom trip on many levels. It was like incredibly potent. And I'm struggling to recall all the insights that I had. But the overall theme of this, of the thing, was that, and I've talked about this for years. The last show I did with Lisa, I even brought this up, that I've been talking about this with Jeff too. He or she who is the least triggered can know the most, right? And this gets down to controlling your glands, controlling your hormones, controlling your central nervous system. When you get excited one way or the other, whether you really like something or you really don't like something, right? Something happens chemically in your body that either distorts or distracts from your ability to neutrally observe what is actually going on and gleaning accurate information from it, right? So our work is to become untriggerable. And that doesn't mean we can't ever get excited or have feelings about something, but we have to, when that happens, we know, at this moment, I am no longer able to perceive information accurately. So, like, don't think, so whatever the information you're taking in is, don't rely on that. The only accurate information can come when you're in a neutral, calm, unexcited kind of place, right? And this goes to all of this that you're talking about with illusion warfare and chicken feed and propaganda and all of this stuff. Every bit of it. They don't care if we fucking discover their crimes, because once we discover their crimes, we're going to be so bent out of shape of it about it for so long that it'll be days, weeks, months, years, decades, whatever, before we can see accurately what was happening and why, and therefore do anything about it.
Yeah.
Right. So
illusion-based economy.
Illusion, everything is illusion. And the thing that is the cause of the illusion is our own body's reaction to excitatory information or stimulus. Right. And so it's very, like, one of the things I'm recognizing is a lot of the insights I'm having recently is because I'm just more neutral emotionally. Like, I don't get so Twitter-pated one way or the other often anymore, right? And I used to have to do that by suppressing my body's reaction to things through drugs. And that's where I did a lot of my research and figured out a lot of stuff, like, in my head. But I couldn't understand, like, in my own reality in front of myself, like literally the space outside of my front door, how this was operating, right? And it has taken me actually being able to sort of learn to control my own emotions and physiology to be able to start to get information and truth that is everywhere around us, right? But it's not as exciting. It's not that quick hit like the thing you're talking about on the internet, the Pythagorean control, like the Pythagorean numeral story, right? Or whatever. And so there's this Rosicrucian book about glands that talks about this very, very thing, that your ability to connect with your divine nature and receive that really high information is 100% correlated to the control of your endocrine system. And either you're controlling it or something else is.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, think about all the things that we have out there that are acting to try and control the endocrine system. They don't have to control your life if they can control your endocrine system. If they can do things that make your endocrine system out of whack, then you will control your life for them. It's kind of like what you were saying about the, you know, right? That agents will
online,
yeah,
online crusading against an illusion. Yeah, dedicating your life to fighting, you know, the dragon of illusion.
right.
And what a waste of your life when you could be out there, like you said, looking for a portal, looking for a gateway, looking for messages from the sky. You know, this is what I mean, man. Like, I don't want to like say to people you should all get off the internet, but you've definitely got to kind of get back out there in the nature,
We
yeah,
need to
you know,
understand
yeah,
when we're on the internet, it's like listening to music on an MP3 as opposed to hearing it played live. A lot of the information is lost. It's condensed, it's compressed into something that only represents certain aspects of the overall information field. You there?
Yeah. And not to like blow my own trumpet here, but where I came onto the online space so late in life, I'm essentially the clueless outsider that can see what's going on, as opposed to the people who have been here so long, they think they know everything when they're just so blinded by the nonsense, you know? Sometimes a clueless outsider can just straight away see what's wrong here or what's good here, you know?
Yeah.
Um,
Well, that's
yeah,
oftentimes
you can,
that's why they bring in some outsider to fix something going wrong inside of a company or a corporation, because the people who've been working there for a long time have that culture so ingrained that they can't get out of their own way. So somebody comes in with a fresh set of eyes and it's obvious what's happening.
Yeah.
All right.
Right. Because I've got a lot of the old guard conspiracy people really don't fucking like me, you know, they really got an issue with me. It's because I'm pointing out how ridiculous their nonsense is, and they don't want to let go. It comes back a little bit. It comes back to an ego, you know. They're holding on to this little bit of fame and fortune they got, which purely exists online from their discovery of some chicken feed or whatever. And they just, you know, you've got to let go of your ego and let go and just go back to zero, you know. And it's all about letting go, and that involves the online world. And so yeah. In your mushroom trip, how was it shown to you? Like, what were the images shown to you? Like, how did you get there?
So,
or is that all leaving your?
So, I mean, I'll probably talk about this a little bit more over the course of the next week or so. But one of the things I become very well aware of in the mushroom space is that I am observing something and that thing is observing me back. Right. And that there is like, sometimes I feel like I'm in some sort of I don't know how to explain it exactly. I have to come up with better language for this, but like I'm in a field, like I don't mean a field like outside, but just like I'm in a field of light and sound and geometry and information, and that there's other consciousnesses and awarenesses there too. And we are engaged in like a playful exchange of information on a similar way that like Michael and I do it, right? And that the accuracy of that information is confirmed through winking of eyes and like splatterings of like sparkle and color. Okay. So sometimes like I will have a thought or an idea and I will get feedback inside the mushroom space that like is like, yes, that's it. Or, oh, we like it. That's interesting kind of thing. And then other times suddenly I'm looking at something and it's like, feels like I'm being shown something. And I'm like, oh, wow. And then I realize that whatever consciousness is showing me that Like they're doing, like when they're doing the thing in the other direction, they're sending out an idea and I'm responding to it. Right. And like, for some reason, I've been doing this enough time for enough years now that it's very, very clear to me that like why I glean so much information from the mushroom space is because I don't go to that space paranoid or with the expectation of seeing or hearing a particular thing. I am just watching what is going on. And some of it is funny, and some of it is really interesting, and some of it is easy to understand, and some of it is hard to understand. But I'm just observing neutrally an environment, like an information, sound, light kind of environment. And I am not forming any opinions about what it means immediately. And sometimes, like things that have been outside of my ability to understand in my normal life become understandable to me because of that observer position I'm taking in the mushroom trip. Right? Like I'm going to have to work harder to really be able to explain this well. But
well, you're trying to, we're trying to use the 3D human language to describe a 7D reality. So it's very hard.
So I spent a lot of time like we'll be quiet in the trip, and then sometimes Laura and I will talk. But a lot of it goes back to the projects for me, right? The MK Ultra kind of stuff. And it feels like when I'm in the trip, I can see it from my perspective. And I can also see it from the perspective of the person who supposedly was like conducting the experiment or running the project, right? And I think one of the things that gets lost in our trying to uncover information about this stuff is like, why were the people interested in this? Why were they looking at this? And we confuse certain, I think a lot of things that we think are people doing things is actually people just studying something, looking at it. And then we assign what our understanding of what that intent is to it, which stops us from looking at what they were looking at. And when I'm in that space, like I'm sort of seeing, it's kind of like being a fly on the wall in the room that the experiments were conducted in, right? And rather than feeling in that space like something was being done to me or whoever or whatever I'm observing, I'm fascinated with the response of the people doing the observation. They are studying, they are learning something. Right. And that doesn't mean that never gets into a place of like weaponization or use for something you or I might not like or whatever. But that's a small percentage of it. Right. Like some of this is really just curiosity and exploration. And I'm never for, doing things to people without their consent or whatever. And so like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do something to someone without their consent. And if I walk in on a scenario where that's happening, I'm going to do something to stop it. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't ask questions about what one was really looking for when those things were being done. And for some reason, like the way that I'm observing in that space allows me to see the things from enough different perspectives that I'm having a different understanding of what the point of all of this was. Right. And I think we're living in like a giant experiment where there's a lot, everybody's just trying to understand what is happening. Right. And, when we start to assume intent to a certain extent, we lose, like the curiosity is gone. We know what's happening and why, and we better do something about it. And then the learning ends. Right. And this is not me saying that that's okay. That like my opinion on it for this purpose is irrelevant. I am just observing the field when I'm in that space. And what I find is fantastic. It is like literally like it's fascinating stuff, right? Like just what would be like, I have a completely different perception that doesn't disregard the old perception, but is a new on like why it is that Joseph Mengele was so obsessed with the eyes of the Jewish women in the camps, supposedly. And I recognize that that's partially chicken feed probably as well. But I think there's something unique about probably the lenses of the eyes of every single human being, right? But they're all different, just like the genetics are all different. and how one sees something is unique to them. And being able to sort of understand the perspective of another, like what their angle is or their angel is like a fascinating thing to study, right? Like this gets into what we talked about the crosses, coordinates, points of light, realities being generated from them, and all of this kind of stuff, right? Like, I don't think people conducting most of these experiences have disdain for the people that some people call their victims. I call the experiencers. I think they're fascinated with them. And just sometimes people go way too far in their curiosity and they lose control of their morals. And then we get into some of these situations, right? But the thing that is being studied is fascinating.
Yeah. I also, just to add to that, I don't rule out that the double cross, to bring it back round, the double cross might be a necessary force. And although it might seem very evil to us, it might actually be stopping way more evil.
Or
if we got rid of the double cross, things might be way worse. Maybe they're keeping things in check. Maybe they're keeping the balance. Maybe they're, I don't know. I'm a realist. I realize that there's no. I don't. I'm not a believer in utopia, and that if you remove them, we're just suddenly going to be walking in, the fields, skipping around.
It's entirely possible that, like, they're really just like what we think of as like an evil. I mean, I don't know if I think about it so much in terms of like evil force or not evil force. They're studying something, they're learning something, and then like much later, maybe later than we prefer, like those things that they're learning are creating like reality in a way that we can experience. It's like there's getting there first, right? And so
Yeah.
is the issue or the problem of, well, then they're telling us what that is, or they're controlling that, and and that may not actually be okay. But the truth is, there's a lot of things that whatever that system is does or creates that we actually like and that we don't want to live without, right? So I think like the place that we are maybe striving to get to, and I don't know if this is a collective thing or something that can only be done individually, and that's like where you get into stuff with like secret societies and initiatory processes and stuff like that, is that at the point you're actually ready to understand it, you will, and no one's going to try and stop you there. And so this idea of like, oh, we all need to band together and fight for disclosure, like I don't know about that, right? Like, but like I guess what we would be going for is just like a level of honesty about what is happening, a certain level of transparency. And I don't know if that transparency is like that everybody has to know everything all the time, or just this removal of the intentional deception or distraction or whatever it is. Like, I fully believe that like you understand something when you're ready to understand it, right? And I don't know what the forces are that are like creating this guardrail that we feel is like this imprisonment of humanity or whatever it is. But so I don't know, like I have a lot more thinking to do about this. But where I am at with this now is I'm only getting useful and actionable intelligence when I remove the like when I'm no longer like looking for someone to blame or being mad about something that happened or like wanting to stop somebody or any of that kind of stuff. Like I can't get the kind of information that explains to me how reality works when I'm doing that, right? Sure, maybe you can stop a crime. Maybe you can, whatever people are doing when they're like trying to, do the stuff they're doing with the information. But for me, I want to understand how light, sound, space, and time work. And rather than impugn the motives of other people who are trying to understand how that works, I just need to look at what's happening for me, right? And and I wasn't always that way. Like it was, like there was a time when I wasn't going to be able to be content as an individual until everybody on the planet understood the level of corruption and, deviance and blah, blah, blah that was going on in the world. And like all I was doing, all that was happening when that was happening is like, I was not getting along with anybody. I was doing a ton of drugs. I was like, sitting in my own apartment, TikToking away, even though there was no TikTok then, the thing that you were talking about, filling my mind with chicken feed to get upset about, right? And not like understanding on that deep, deep cellular level, like what was happening all around me. Even though I got like big hits sometimes, right? Like sometimes I would have this intuitive feeling and it would be absolutely right. But it took me years to tear through the walls of like how evil it all was to actually see what was happening. And this all comes down to light, sound, space, and time, and things coming together, two things crossing each other and generating a reality to be explored, right? And so this is not me saying that my way of doing this is the right way and the people who are studying all the injustices are wrong or whatever. That's just not what I'm doing anymore right now. Like, I'm sure I'll talk about it sometimes because it's tangential, but in terms of like the thing that I am mostly interested in, right? The thing that is like sort of in front of my face, right out here in front of me, right? Like that has nothing to do with all the stuff. This person's a criminal, that person's a criminal. They're, doing some awful thing to humanity. They're stealing our soul. Da, 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 da. I can walk outside and look at the way light hits a piece of sand that has quartz in it or the glass panel on a building and see the prism that is generated from it. And what does my mind think when I see that? Nobody else can control that. Right? And I think the like actual information about how reality works is there. It's right in front of our face in every grain of sand around us. And the amount of words that are generated about everything else is like this invisible barrier between us and that you and I participate in, and therefore are agents of the double cross.
Yeah.
Right. So I think this is a uniquely human process to have experiences and then to talk about them. So I'm not suggesting we don't, but just the awareness of like what we're actually doing when you're in the field and when you're describing the field, and when does your describing of the field, like how much time you spend describing the field outweigh the time you're spending in the field. And that's out of balance.
Yeah, I love it. No, it's it sounds like you're on the right path. You're cutting away the nonsense. You're focusing on what matters. Because a lot of that stuff you just got to ask yourself, like, if so, so what?
Right.
A lot of that conspiracies, if so, so what? And I'm kind of with you, Emily. I'm at the point now where I don't know really much more I can. I've only been on, online for like 1.5 years. I don't really know what much more I can do in that space. I think I can do all I can about do. I could probably keep repeating the same nonsense of going back to Ukraine and pointing out there's nothing really going on. But on a personal level, it doesn't do anything for me.
Right.
It might get me 600. It might get me 600 quid in Patreon and a few pats on the back and a bit of attention for 5 minutes. I don't give a shit about that. I never cared about that. So right. I'm with you, Emily. I'm going to start, doing what I was doing before anyway. Just getting back out in nature and seeing what I can see. I'm going to start stargazing at night a lot more. Really trying to get that deep sleep and focusing on what my dreams are telling me. Unfortunately, I can't trip on mushrooms no matter how much I've tried. I know when I sleep on mushrooms, I have quite vivid dreams, which are quite good. But I cannot trip. I don't know if that's some kind of
What do you mean you cannot trip? Like nothing happens?
I just feel baked. I don't see any patterns. I don't see nothing. I just feel a bit baked, and that's it. Or everyone else is there, fooling around, touching their hands, and saying they can see this and that. I just feel baked, and that's it.
You close your eyes.
Only one experience.
You close your eyes, or you leave your eyes?
Yeah. I've tried that. Yeah.
I wonder if your stomach produces an enzyme, right? So, like when they do ayahuasca, The reason that it's a combination of two different things is because one of them acts as like an MAO, like one, like there's like it's something to do with the MAOI inhibitor kind of thing. And if they just did the thing that's making you trip, like you wouldn't actually trip because the stomach acid is like your stomach enzyme is like doing a thing. And the other plant blocks the stomach thing from doing the thing. So then you can trip. So I'm wondering if there was something that you could that your stomach, do you take any like medication, or do you have some other, do you have like some sort of like acid reflux issue, or do you have some weird digestive issue or anything like that?
Not that I know of. Not that I know of.
It would be interesting to tinker. I'm gonna have to think about that. I'm gonna have to think about that because that is surprising. That is surprising, or that is like, I mean, this is. Let's talk about this offline. Like, I have a lot of thoughts about that. But I'm gonna have to.
Like I said, one time I took 10 grams, and you know, same old thing. I felt baked, and I went to sleep. And when I woke up, I remember the dream was like really kind of like more interactive than usual. Like for me, dreams are usually I just go with whatever's happening. I don't try and control it. But for this dream, it was like Microsoft Paint. You know, I was there basically building the universe.
Yeah.
I drew a loop like you do with, remember Microsoft Paint where you drag a loop?
Yep. I
clicked inside it. A water appeared. And then next thing you know, a fucking giant interdimensional chipmunk appeared. I was just there drinking at this river I built, and then I'm building mountains behind it. All like a pet, like I'm God with a pen, you know. And that's the only real of all the time I've tried mushroom. I had a whole like 2 years of microdosing, trying big amounts, trying it from different people. I even took one time I went out in nature. Yeah, for me, you know, it doesn't really happen. But I'm quite resistant to a lot of things as well. Like, you know, they're mad pills that people just take half. I'd have to take 2.
Right. Yeah. No, I have like that with some things. Some things I'm not as susceptible to as other people. Laura, the same. I'm going to have to jump off in just a minute, but I want to think about this and see if there's anything in my sort of nutritional understanding lexicon that I can think of. But then there's also some bigger picture ideas of what might be going on. So let's chat about this again sometime. But that is interesting. Okay. And now I have a new deep dive to take, a new lot of chicken feed to sort through for the protein nugget. Okay. Les, thank you. I always enjoy chatting with you. I think that we've opened up a lot of stuff in this one to be further explored. Check out those shows. And the only reason part of why I like the shows is they just sometimes help a little bit to like organize the sensory input that we're also getting from our real environment. Or like if there's a thought or an idea or theory that we've thrown out there, and then you see that it's in a television show, it means that, especially if it's in the television show after you've had the thought, that it's occurred to someone else too, and this is what it might look like. Right. And that doesn't mean we like go with whatever they're exactly saying in the show. But at this point, the things that we're being told are fiction are carrying more actual useful information than the documents or the things we're being told are the truth or whatever. Right. So anyhow, definitely. All right. That's going to wrap it up for the recording. I'm going to hang on just 1 second, Les. All right. Bye, guys. Okay.